Last time, on My Boyfriend's Boyfriend and Me, we left Ireland for a bit of sun and calm, and instead wandered straight into Pattaya's neon hurricane. That's where Michael met Nick, 21, boy band body, eyebrows sent from heaven. What started as harmless holiday flirting turned into something else. A spark, a pull, this strange little gravity between them that kept tugging, even when I stepped back and told myself it was fine. We moved on to Phuket thinking the moment had burnt itself out. But electricity doesn't always die out. It can leave a static on your arms, follows you, clings to you. Welcome to Act 3, the static that sticks. So, we arrive in Phuket. The air was thick in that way that sticks to your skin straight away. Not heavy, just present. Even standing still, you could feel yourself slowing down. And the first thing I notice is the sound, or the lack of it. No neon shouting at you, just heat and the slow tick of the place settling. And here, in its quiet stillness, I had time to think about it. Some of it sat easily with me. The bar, the flirting, the way it all happened in plain sight, under lights, with music, with witnesses. Watching Nick's obvious desire to be near him, to keep drifting back into his orbit whenever he could. That part made sense. It was visible. It was contained. I could see it happening in front of me, and I could even feel generous about it. About letting him have that. About enjoying the new skip in his step. The way his shoulders sat a little higher, like something heavy had been quietly set down. But the beach didn't sit the same way. The meeting I hadn't seen, the hours I hadn't been part of, the part of the day that happened somewhere else, under a different sun, while I was filling time, left in the dark. Had it been planned? Had it been impulsive? Who suggested it? What did it feel like while it was happening? I wasn't sure why that part stuck with me. I didn't yet know why I kept skirting around it instead of sitting inside it. Why I'd think about it briefly, then reach for something else. And at the same time, it felt pointless to dwell on it. The moment had passed. It wasn't likely to repeat. Why focus on the one piece that seemed to carry discomfort, when there was so much else that felt bright? So I didn't push at it. I let myself look back at the parts that felt easier to hold. The parts I could frame as generous. The parts that let me feel calm. Phuket, when we arrived, is the Thailand you see in holiday reels and travel agent windows. It was meant to be the quiet part of the trip. My dream, everyone else's nightmare. And if Pattaya felt like someone shook a glitter cannon directly at your face, Phuket was the opposite. A quiet millionaire's villa 2 miles from town, rented to us at cost price by the friend of a friend of a friend. The edge of the jungle touching its pool. Cicadas at dusk. Warm stone under bare feet. The kind of place where time doesn't so much pass as melt away. And the strange thing was, much like the surroundings, the air between me and Michael had changed too. Not fireworks, more like a soft static. Something warm still clinging to him from Pattaya. And now, instead of neon chaos, we had the glow of it. Gentler, warmer, more intimate. The kind of closeness that settles in quietly, once there's nothing loud left to compete with it. The lightness was immediate. Little affectionate gestures he'd never normally do. A hand on my back as he passed, sitting close without checking the space first. Years of distance in the small, everyday ways had softened, and suddenly there was a glimmer of tenderness again. And this is important to say. Michael doesn't usually like being touched. It's just how he's wired. The more you get to know Michael, the less he wants you touching him. In a moment of crisis for my sister some time ago, Michael hugged her. She said it was the most impactful hug she got that day. Not because it was long or comforting, It certainly wasn't. But because she knew how much it must have taken for him to give it to her. It's just how he's built. An odd little mystery I've never been able to solve, and if I'm honest, a small ache I've had to learn to live around. But after Pattaya, the rules changed. He leaned into physicality, fully when he'd been with Nick. And now, a little with me too. He was more confident, more present, more himself than I'd seen in years. And here's why. Michael is one of those people whose presence walks into a room before he does. Tall, over 6 foot, and somehow his confidence makes him seem taller again. Handsome in this easy, accidental way. Jet black hair that he rarely bothers to cut. Stubble he trims only when it becomes socially unacceptable not to. No skincare routine, no grooming products. The kind of man who thinks a 5-in-1 shower gel is a personality. He's loud, bold, opinionated, and funny without trying. That part never changed. But a year before this trip, the light inside him had dimmed. Not all at once. Slowly, quietly. The way things change when you're not looking. Walking up a hill meant stopping every 100 meters. His back hurt, his calves ached for hours after. Everything took more effort, moving, walking, even just being in his body. And his face, he looked tired, older than his age. The laugh lines around his eyes stayed deep, but they no longer pointed toward joy. He wasn't ashamed of how he looked. He'd simply adapted to it. But the irritability had crept in, the grumpiness, the heaviness. The smiles were rarer. The Michaelness of him was still there, just wrapped in exhaustion. Then, over the 9 months before Thailand, he started quietly rebuilding himself. He lost 4 stone, slowly, steadily, so gradually that week to week you barely noticed, until you compared old photos. His mobility improved, his breathing eased, his body moved more freely again. Things fit him, literally and figuratively, a little better. But the spark, the identity, the feeling of being himself, that hadn't returned yet. And then, Bangkok. I'd convinced him to get a proper haircut, a real one, and handed him the money. He went in looking like the Michael I knew, handsome but unstyled, effortless to the point of indifference. He came out looking like the Michael I remembered. They shaped his stubble, carved out a jawline he hadn't seen in years. The haircut framed his face, brought sharpness and youth back into it. He bought new clothes that fit. And suddenly the man he'd been rebuilding, the man who'd slowly slipped away, was staring back at him. He took a photo on an escalator, rising backwards up to the SkyTrain, and sent it to his family. They teased him, said it must be a filter. He posted it in his work team's thumbnail. The first time he'd ever shown his face there. He sent it out to the world. That's when something clicked. He looked 10 years younger, yes, but more importantly, the life was back in his eyes. The spark had returned. When I saw the photo, I felt proud. I'd never lost him. That part of him had never truly disappeared. It had just gone quiet. And now it was loud again. At the time, I thought Nick had caused all this. The flirting, the attention, that giddy sprint across the pavement to kiss his head. But later I learned that wasn't true. Nick didn't create Michael's transformation. He was just the first person to see it instantly, fully, without hesitation, only 24 hours after Michael had seen it in himself. The first person to respond to the new him with open desire. The first person to reflect back the man Michael now recognized in himself. Nick didn't give him the spark. Nick confirmed it. And that confirmation hit somewhere deep. Somewhere even Michael might not have known had gone empty. And the wild part is, When someone feels seen like that, the glow doesn't stay with the person who gave it. It comes home with you. That was Phuket, me and Michael in a quiet villa, and him glowing like someone had turned the power back on inside him. I felt seen too, in a strange way. Seen by the version of him I'd grown to miss over the last few years. A version of him I'd been longing for without even knowing it. But outside of all this, outside of Michael glowing and softening and coming back to himself, something in Phuket wasn't landing for me. Some joy was missing. I was running around caretaking again, trying to make our city-loving travel companions enjoy a place they were determined not to enjoy. Dragging people toward relaxation is exhausting. And it wasn't new. I've always been good at this part. Reading the room, smoothing the edges, adjusting myself to keep things moving. Making sure everyone else is comfortable, entertained, looked after. It's a skill I picked up early. So early it stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like the default setting. If someone else is unhappy, I notice. If someone else is uncomfortable, I move. If something needs managing, I step in, often before anyone's asked. Most of the time, it looks like generosity, like flexibility, like being easygoing. A lot of the time, it genuinely is. But sitting there in Phuket, hot, tired, trying to make everyone else enjoy a place they'd already decided not to enjoy, I felt a flicker of something I didn't quite want to name yet. A question maybe, one I wasn't ready to ask properly, about how often I confuse keeping the peace with putting myself second. I realized I hadn't once asked myself what I needed, or what I wanted, or whether I'd been shaping this whole trip around everyone else's comfort, and just fitting myself in where I could. And the more I tried to engage our travel companions, the more they resisted. At my weekly therapy session, I was told, gently but very clearly, to stop. To stop managing everyone else's experience. To stop trying to make people enjoy something they'd already decided not to enjoy. And to actually plan this trip for myself. So I did. Not in some grand, dramatic way. More quietly than that. Earlier in the week, I'd hired a driver for the day. A plan I'd been genuinely excited about. Viewpoints, temples, a small local lunch stop he loved. The kind of day that lets a place unfold slowly without pressure. Our traveling companions came along and hated it. Every viewpoint came with sighs. Every temple with complaints about the heat. Every stop with the sense that we were somehow doing Thailand wrong. And I, as the planner of the whole experience, was doing it wrong. When the driver took us to a small local place for lunch, burgers, plastic chairs, no branding, they were openly horrified. They said things like, "No, when you hire a chauffeur for the day, he should know people want beach clubs, resorts, not this." They spoke as if something had failed. I felt like I had failed. What they didn't know, what they couldn't see, was that this route was all my idea. Where our host had taken his own family the last time they'd come here. The same driver who usually worked for a friend of ours, an actual millionaire, and who helped plan this day the way he lived them. Quietly, intentionally, without needing to prove anything. And me adding in a few bits I thought we'd all love. But that was our companions. They didn't really see where they were staying either. The villa wasn't flashy. No glass walls, no influencer angles, no performance of wealth. Just marble floors that stayed cool underfoot. A huge pool fed by a natural spring underground. Outdoor cushions thick enough to sink into and disappear. Space. Quiet. Everything expensive in a way that doesn't ask to be noticed. I started to understand it then. They weren't responding to luxury. They were responding to the performance of it. Labels, venues, the right kind of backdrop. If it didn't signal status loudly enough, they couldn't recognize it at all. Maybe that was why they'd been so dismissive back in Pattaya, too. Why they hadn't really seen what was happening between Michael and Nick. They were always scanning for the performance, missing what was actually happening right in front of them. Trying to shepherd people like this toward enjoyment, toward something they didn't recognize as valuable, was exhausting. And a battle I realized I would never win. So going forward, I decided not to anymore. I'd book what I wanted to do and invite them, being clear about what each thing would be like. I booked yoga at sunset on the beach, booked a show, and then I rebooked the driver. The same route, the same stops, but refined. The parts I knew I loved. The parts I knew Michael would love too. They didn't want to come, so happily, this weekend's drive would be just the two of us. It felt like a small but important signal, to myself more than anyone else, that I could come first, that I didn't need to manage everyone, that I was allowed to shape the trip around what nourished me. And there we were. Sun setting over the pool behind us as Michael was working, warm air, this soft, reconnected intimacy between us. I didn't know then that the day I planned, the one I'd quietly claimed for me and Michael this weekend, I would later decide to give away. I also didn't know the static from Pattaya was still sticking to Michael quite so strongly, or that it was about to spark back to life. We were sitting outside on the patio. Me fresh off this therapy session glow-up about boundaries and self-care. And I was going through my plans, asking everyone if they wanted to come with me to the things I'd booked. And I turned to Michael and said, I need to know your plan for the weekend so I can fit my Thai cooking class in. Simple, practical, just a scheduling question. And he went weird, evasive, vague, the kind of that has a plot behind it. And I just looked at him, because I can read this man like a book with big pictures in large print. What's going on, Michael? He hesitated, looked at the pool, looked back at me, and then he said it. Nick might be coming down to stay. Thank you for listening to this episode of My Boyfriend's Boyfriend. And Me, Act 3, The Static That Sticks. In Phuket, the static from Pattaya finally lands. Right on the fault line between what Michael wants and what I can hold. The next episode isn't about what happened. It's about the part of it I hadn't looked at yet. The things that felt fine on the surface, and the one detail that kept returning when everything went quiet. It's about realizing, slowly, that while I was watching someone I love light up, I hadn't checked in with myself at all, until I was out of the frame entirely. And about what happens when a moment you thought was over asks to come back and take up space. Next time on My Boyfriend's Boyfriend and Me, Act 4, The Event Horizon.